So our monthly discussion topic is going to be our contracted services. We wanted to give you a little information on the services on contracts. We'll talk about each service briefly. We're not going to talk about every single service. There are some that are changing. For example, our on-the-job work and training options like internships and work experiences are going to have some changes to them, and we're going to do some training on that. So there are some service areas that we will not go as in depth with, but I'm going to put into the chat the link to our community partners guide. And when you go out to that community partners guide, go under the contracted services button, and then you will be able to take a look at the services that we have. And as we go through them, if you want, you can see that each service has like a little plus sign if there's more information underneath there. But we're just going to run through some of our contracted services. And then after we are done with that, we will open this up for questions and answers. And the questions and answers can be specific to the contracted services that we just talked about, or any questions, burning questions that you have for our community partnership team. I know there's a lot that's moving as far as the fiscal year ending, and all of our grants and contracts are coming to an end and starting again. So you can certainly do that. We do want our question and answer time to be live, so we'll go over that. But you can hold your questions, and we'll just start with some of our services. So I'm going to start and talk a little bit about some of our job-related services. So that's that first section under there. Of course, we have the placement and retention services that we pay under a performance-based agreement. And so for that, as you all know, we've had performance-based agreements for a very long time. We have two types of PBAs now. This started last year. We have our general PBA, which is $3,800. And then we have the newer E1 PBA, and that is for any individual that has one of the Medicaid waivers. And that is a $5,000 PBA that has an extra milestone, which is 120 days of service. Each of our milestones has an invoice and report requirement. And then we have a standardized monthly progress report that needs to be submitted by the 10th of the month that would summarize the prior month's work that you did with that individual. And those monthly progress reports should be going directly to the secured emails at the bottom of your invoice. So the other thing we have under our job-related services is our customized employment and discovery services. And we have a number of partners who provide this customized service. One of the things to provide customized employment within VR and have it on your contract is to have completed the 40-hour ACRE approved course. And then also pass the VRS competency review process. So VRS does offer customized employment training on a regular basis, or you can get the ACRE approved coursework elsewhere and then go through the VRS competency review to have that added to your contract. Another service that we have is informational interviews. And informational interviews is really a service where you're assisting an individual in setting up and how to conduct informational interviews so that they can get more information on the career area or jobs of interest. That service is paid for your direct service time. So the time that you're working one-on-one with that individual, either in preparing them for the interview, if you're working with them side by side to connect with businesses, and then also assisting them when they go on those interviews. We also have job coaching, which is more intensive training and support for an individual. We have worked really hard in the last year to do some training that shows the difference between follow-up, which comes under the job placement and retention services, and job coaching. And the job coaching, again, is a more intensive support service that is now layered on top of a PBA and has its own reporting. And under the information for job coaching, you can find a job coaching report and sample. The other service under job-related services is job seeking skills training. Some of our partners have specific curriculum that assists people with job seeking skills training. I always think of job seeking skills training as like capital J. We know that when every individual enters job placement services under a PBA, that all of our partners, all the placement professionals are going to take a look at the individual's resumes. They're going to talk to them about interviewing. They're going to take a look at their cover letters, maybe offer some suggestions, edits, or changes. Job seeking skills training services is really more about digging deeper and really helping the individual who needs assistance with getting their work history together, really digging in and just starting with interviewing skills when maybe that's been a huge barrier for an individual. So it's a more intensive support. And finally, under the job related services, we have job shadowing. And that is a service where we look to our community partners to help our individuals set up job shadows where they can go on site and see what a job really looks like in action. Then we are going to talk just a teeny bit about work and voc evals. And the work and voc evals are a service that we have on some of our contracts to provide an assessment of a person's performance in a simulated or real work situation to determine a person's abilities, skills, attitudes towards work, and work behaviors. The work and voc eval should be on an individual's employment plan, and work and voc eval is one of the service areas where manager approval is needed to put it on there. A few of the other services I just want to touch really briefly on come under the other provided services, and that is the DHS background check. We do have some of our community partners who authorize to do the DHS background checks on behalf of a participant to assist them in identifying possible employment goals. A DHS background check must include the clearance levels of the blue, yellow, or red. We have intakes on our community partner contracts. Intakes are in each, and intakes are authorized so that our community partners can conduct that initial meeting and fill out the initial paperwork that's needed per service. Intakes are only for the hourly services, so the intakes does not apply to performance-based agreements. And then we have both travel and transportation. And these, again, were relatively new for contracts. Travel, I love, as Anne likes to say, travel is easy breezy. It's from point A to point B. You don't need to have that on an employment plan. It doesn't need to, a CFP does not apply to that. You just need to make sure that if you're seeking travel for any hourly service outside of a PBA, that communication happens with the referring counselor and that travel is put on to the authorization. Transportation to vendor is when there is a participant in the vehicle. And it's a little bit different. It has a different line item because the transportation to vendor is similar in looking at all transportation we might provide to an individual to get from point A to point B. So it's like looking at a bus card or things like that. So from this perspective, then CFP will apply to the individual. And when that, so if an individual has a 50% CFP, then what you would be paid would be half of the $28 an hour, which is our current rate at this time. So those are the services I wanted to touch base on, and I'm going to turn it over to Janine.
Well, I get to talk about everyone's favorite topic, which is pre-ETS or pre-ETS services. Those are the services for youth and young adults ages 14 to 21 that are either enrolled in high school or some type of transition program or post-secondary training. And they've been, currently the way they operate is that you can ask for prep time and have that authorized, but the changes that are coming are going to include removing that prep time as an option. and doing more of an alignment with general services, which will hopefully make things much easier for partners. So currently you have a little bit of indirect billable time, but it's also caused quite a headache with billing. But in general, pre-ETS is a federally mandated way of funding those early kind of interventions. Typically, they're a little bit higher level than some of our general services because what we're looking at is really helping youth get exposed to their work and training options at a younger age so that they're more likely to be in competitive integrated employment by the time they are ready to be on their own. So there's services like job exploration counseling, where you want to work with either a student or a group of students to really explore those labor markets and vocational interests. You know, what's out there, what's in demand, you know, are there non-traditional employment options that would be a good fit for that student? You also want to do some post-secondary education counseling, or you might be authorized to do that. And that's, again, not specifically supporting the person at school, but it's more, what are their options? How do they apply for financial aid? How would they work with their families and school to get, you know, everything together for an application? And just really explore those options and support them as they get enrolled and started in the application process. Instruction and self-advocacy is very similar to independent living skills for our general adults. It's really helping create those opportunities and peer mentors and places for a person to learn about their disability, to learn how to advocate for themselves in different service areas. It possibly might be, again, kind of a higher level. You know, if you have to do any more intensive support than that, it might switch over to a general service, but just a higher level overview of what are their service options, what could they apply for, and if it's simple to do so, can you support them in, you know, looking at their housing options but primarily it focuses more on just that, how to speak up, you know, in their educational and community settings and advocate for their needs and the accommodations that best support them. Workplace readiness training is things that, you know, really focus on how is the youth going to be ready for work. That might be, again, some things around independent living, financial literacy, how do you get along with people, what are your soft skills? It might be understanding public transportation and their benefits. And it might be kind of those really intensive, almost like job seeking skills trainings that we would do in general, which includes resumes, interview practice, you know, figuring out how to even fill out a job application. There is a pre-ETS intake. It's only for students who are actually eligible for vocational rehab. Again, typically in pre-ETS, it's a little bit different because we serve a pool of students that we refer to as potentially eligible, meaning they could apply and be found eligible for VRS, but they have chosen not to do so at this point, and we don't need them to actually apply because we can provide some of those higher level services through this pre-ETS funding without doing so. But an intake is for someone that is actually on a employment plan and eligible with VRS. So they're going to have the intake, and that's, again, that first meeting. We have work experiences under pre-ETS. We are also adding internships under pre-ETS, but that, again, will be some training that comes later, so we're not going to talk too much in depth about that today. But work experiences are just finding that really short-term or intermediate job for a young person. We kind of jokingly refer to it as the Dairy Queen job. Sometimes it's shorter than that. Sometimes somebody has so limited experience or awareness of work that it's just, you know, maybe a month on site at a location doing a job that wasn't an open posted position, but it's just an opportunity for that high school student to experience work. So those are kind of the pre-ETS services. The reporting currently, like I said, involves some breakdown of making sure that you correctly match the activity you did with the correct pre-ETS job title. So going to the website and really looking at those definitions. We also have several desk aids and guides that really spell out pre-ETS services. That's a common kind of billing or invoicing question that comes up is, you know, hey, I got a report, but what they're actually talking about is this pre-ETS service, not this pre-ETS service. So it's important to look carefully at those as you're doing your reporting for that. The next thing I'm going to talk about is social coaching. This is not something that a lot of people have on their contracts. We're away from pre-ETS now, just a general service social coaching. But I just wanted to dive into it a little bit because we've clarified the definition quite a bit on our website. So I really recommend that you go out and take a look at that. It's a very specific time-limited skills training. You're using techniques that support somebody who has a social communication disorder. Historically, we've kind of identified that as autism spectrum disorder. However, there are many other disabilities or communication disorders that would also qualify someone to receive this service. There are specific skills and techniques that are best practice to be utilized to help somebody better understand how to communicate socially and form stronger relationships. So what this particular service has to do is it involves the vocational rehab counselor that does the referral is going to set some specific goals with you as the provider and the individual on what needs to be worked on or improved. That might be something like self-awareness or how to speak up for yourself, how to get along with others, you know, how to kind of make your communication clearer so that others can understand you. Once those specific goals are set, there'll also be kind of a defined goal of what does success look like for that individual. And then a certain number of hours will be provided for that. This does have some required qualifications, and you should talk to your contract liaison if you are questioning whether or not you and your staff qualify to provide this service. We'd be happy to have that conversation with you. So I'm going to pass it off to Jess next.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. So the first service that I'm going to talk about is our EDS, or our Employee Development Services. This service was previously known as Work Adjustment Training, or WAT, W-A-T. So for some of our providers that have been around for a long time, this is now Employee Development Services, or EDS. They can be provided, and you can find them on your contract as both integrated and non-integrated. Integrated would obviously be at a community business or a community site, and non-integrated would be in a controlled environment that would not fit the definition of competitive integrated employment. Within EDS, what we're really looking for is a way to evaluate or develop or reestablish skills, attitudes, personal characteristic, interpersonal skills, work behaviors, and functional capacities to achieve an employment outcome. So this is generally a service that takes place when we're really exploring what those work skills are. I talked about integrated and non-integrated. So for this service, we would be looking for a report that would talk about the skills that are being developed. And generally you see it on a contract as an hourly service for both integrated and non-integrated. We do have a couple providers across the state that have moved from work adjustment training to EDS services. So there may be a few across the state that still have it as an each versus an hourly, but most of them have moved to an hourly rate. I'm then going to move on to post-secondary supports. Post-secondary supports is a service that has recently been combined with our pre-ETS service that was in our general area. So in our general services, we had post-secondary education counseling and we had post-secondary education supports. And what we really realized is that they are very similar services. And so we ended up combining them to include post-secondary supports. So this service could be for an individual that either is looking to enroll into a college or some sort of post-secondary training option, or it could be for an individual that is already enrolled. When looking at exploring colleges and education and training programs, the service could include steps for enrolling in that education or training, possibly exploring financial aid options, and looking at how you successfully transition to a post-secondary or training option. Once the individual is enrolled, it could also include applying for various assistive technologies, or disability trainings, or connecting with accessibility or disability services at the local college or university. And then lastly, it's just the general advocacy as well. So it could include prioritizing classwork, advocating for self, corresponding with teachers or advisors, and helping with navigating financial aid. This service is also an hourly service that has been on contracts. And as I said before, it's been under the 2 service titles, and it is now combined into 1 service title. Then I'm going to move on to consultation for small business. And one of the biggest changes within our small business services is we've actually divided, and we now have small business consultation, or consultation for small business. And then we also have small business coaching as well, or coaching for small business. And between those 2 services have now been separated. So the consultation for small business, again, is generally an hourly service that's on a contract. And what we're expecting or hoping that would happen is to provide technical assistance and other consultation services to an individual that is planning to achieve a small business career. Consultation could be on a specific topic or problem that the entrepreneur has identified. It could include market research, transcribing a business plan, a cost and benefits analysis, and the strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threat analysis, or a SWOT analysis. You could also assist the individual in identifying necessary startup costs, and then any support that could go on within the development of a small business plan. I'm going to bump into small coaching, and then we'll talk about them as a combined service, or not a combined, but as them together. Then we have small business coaching, which was previously just under our time-limited job coaching supports. We've now taken this out and made it specific to small business, because we're aware that small business coaching can be very different than regular job coaching. So this service occurs, the job coaching service occurs after a small business plan is approved by the program specialist, which at this moment is Josh Dean, and the vocational rehabilitation services professional. At that point, then the service looks like it may include support, training, and consultation to the individual as they implement their small business plan that has been approved by VRS. This service can be performed on site, on a job site, or it could be within the community as well. Both the small business coaching and the small business consultation, in order to have that service added to your contract, it does require a consultation with our VRS small business program specialist, which, as I said before, is Josh Dean. So if that's a service, if either of those services are a service that you're interested in, talk to your program specialist, and from there we will then get you connected with Josh Dean, our small business program specialist. And I think I pass it on to Anne now, but I also know that Anne is having some technical difficulties.
Yes, I am still here. I am in the meeting on my cell phone, and this is my personal cell phone. And why I'm telling you that is there's a new baby in the family. So right now there's all these pictures and messages that keep popping up and pinging like, congratulations. So my relatives in like New York and Canton, they're all decide that it's time to chat about the baby. So you're might hear a lot of pinging, and I don't know how to stop that when I'm doing this. So I'm going to be reading off the screen, looking at you guys, looking at baby pictures all at the same time. But I am going to talk about IL services. So IL services, historically, we have had contracts with 8 IL centers for independent living, that have provided IL services. Under contracts, it really depended on what that IL center maybe had some expertise in, or wanted to go ahead and set up a fee for service. Some of our IL centers were like, I'm not going to charge anybody for advocacy services. And another organization might say, we're going to put a fee to that. So we just did what, that organization preferred. So what we really looked at this time around was, what are we doing with IL? How are we authorizing? How are we tracking? And we would have contracts with, some would be peer mentoring, housing, independent living skills training, very common. And then maybe the other organization would also have rehab tech and some other things all under IL. But what we wanted to capture for reporting purposes, all we needed to do was capture the IL service. So we have IL services on contracts in general, and we are really just allowing our partners and our field staff to determine what is best for that individual. So we have some organizations right now that provide some housing supports that falls under IL. Peer mentoring, of course, under IL. Some financial assistance can fall under IL. So it's really dependent on the need. Some services are distinctly job related, and those are pretty easy to tease out. IL can be a little bit more challenging that way, but we can help you support that if you've got some questions, but they're pretty easy to sort out, is what we found out too. Training, I need to talk about skills training. Once again, I'm going between a couple screens and some weird chats. So skills training's been on our contracts for a very long time. Occupational skills and training, I think, is the full title, but it really is a curriculum that is developed typically with the certificate of some sort. We have some organizations that have been doing retail skills training, computer skills training, things like that are really specific to an occupation. Janitorial skills training has been very common. Some organizations get a little confused about, well, I'm doing mock interviewing, wouldn't that be skills training? It's like, that is skills training, but we'll put that under job seeking skills training. So when you think about skills and occupational training, that is where that that work would live under that. It tends to be a little longer in nature too. There can be, some organizations have not only the curriculum, but there could be on-site training options that go with it and whatnot. It tends to be more of a package service. All right, with that, I will stop.
All right, thank you, Anne. Appreciate your multitasking abilities. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we're going to move into questions and answers.